In business and often in life, it feels like we're constantly forced to choose. Do you push for profits? Or do you chase growth?
Right.
Do you focus on today's urgent results or build for tomorrow's long-term vision? Or even how do you empower individual teams while still strengthening the organization, as a whole?
Yeah.
It often feels like a zero-sum game, right?
It's a universal and, frankly, exhausting dilemma. And for decades, companies have been caught in what the authors of our source material today call the corporate cycle.
Okay.
This insight comes from Dominic Dodd and Ken Favaro's book, The Three Tensions, Winning the Struggle to Perform Without Compromise. They argue companies swing dramatically between these goals, boom and bust.
Instead of doing both.
Instead of achieving them simultaneously. Think of General Motors back in the 80s. This massive $80 billion spending spree, supposedly for future growth.
Right.
Only to be followed by drastic cost-cutting in the 90s when profitability, it suffered. It's this constant pendulum swing.
So GM pushes hard for growth, then slams the brakes for profitability, then back again. But Dodd and Favaro say you don't have to compromise. How is that even possible? I mean, what's the fundamental shift needed?
The shift is moving from either thinking to both. Their research is pretty extensive, over 1,000 companies, 2 decades worth of data.
Wow.
And they introduced this really powerful metric, the batting average.
Like in baseball.
Exactly like baseball. A company's batting average here measures how often it hits both objectives in attention simultaneously in a given year.
Okay.
And the critical finding, a batting average above 0.500. So hitting both more often than not is typically associated with top quartile of total shareholder returns, TSR.
So it's not just a neat metaphor, it actually predicts success.
It's a direct indicator of sustained superior performance. Yeah.
So for you, our listener, our mission today is clear. We're going to give you a practical framework, actionable insights from this really groundbreaking research. We'll explore these 3 key tensions. We'll reveal the common bond, the secret sauce. Maybe that allows you to achieve both sides of each tension.
And expose the traps that pull companies back into that cycle.
Right. And equip you with real-world strategies leaders have actually used to win. You don't have to choose. Let's dive deep, starting with that first tension. Profitability versus growth.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's kick off with that first tension. Profitability versus growth. The core question seems simple, but it's tough. How do companies manage to get both positive economic profit margins and positive real revenue growth, in the same year?
It really is a constant struggle for so many. And a lot of leaders think the answer is, balancing, maybe through diversification or maybe through lots of mergers and acquisitions, M&A.
Right. Spread the risk, buy growth. Makes sense on the surface.
It does, but Dodd and Favaro's research really challenges this. They found very little correlation, actually, between how diverse a company's portfolio was or how acquisitive it was and a high batting average. Yeah. Take Blue Circle Industries. They diversified into, of all things, lawnmowers. Revenues doubled, sure. But their batting average for profitability and growth, only 10%. Just 1 year out of 10, they hit both.
Ouch.
Compare that to Danaher. Highly acquisitive, 60 acquisitions over the period studied, yet they maintained a stunning 91% batting average.
91%. So just balancing through diversification or buying companies isn't the magic bullet.
Surprisingly, no. It often turns out to be a dead end, according to their data.
Okay, so if balance isn't the answer, what is the common bond? What lets companies achieve both profit and growth together?
The crucial ingredient, the common bond, as they call it, is customer benefit.
Customer benefit.
Yes. When growth genuinely serves customer benefit, it naturally tends to align with profitability. Which brings us to this really useful distinction they make between good costs and bad costs.
Okay, good costs versus bad costs. Tell me more.
Good costs are the ones essential for creating that customer benefit. Bad costs, they're not. Think about photographic film costs.
Yeah.
For years, they were absolutely good costs, essential. But then digital innovation comes along.
And suddenly they're bad costs.
Exactly, because they no longer deliver the evolving customer benefit people wanted. They became waste.
So it's about intelligently linking what you spend to what customers really value and being ruthless about costs that don't contribute to that value. What strategies did companies use to actually win this tension?
The winners were relentless. They focused laser-like on growing customer benefit while at the same time aggressively containing those bad costs. Take Nokia back in the 90s.
Nokia, mobile phones.
Right. But they didn't just sell phones, they saw them as fashion accessories. They focused on design, ease of use, personalization, real customer benefits back then.
Uh-huh.
Simultaneously, they were super disciplined on costs. Standardized handsets, very few acquisitions, famously low salaries even. That dual focus got them an 88% batting average between 92 and 2000.
Wow. Any other examples?
BMW is another great one. They were enhancing customer benefit performance, handling, quality, rolling out new models like the 1 Series, the X Series SUVs.
While also managing costs.
Exactly. Reducing bad costs through flexible manufacturing, sharing components across models, even outsourcing the engineering for the X Series SUV. It's that constant dual pursuit.
Yeah.
Better for the customer, leaner internally.
But it can go wrong. There are traps, right? What pulls companies into that cycle of chasing growth that doesn't pay off?
2 main traps they highlight. First is the customer focus trap. Now, this sounds weird, but it isn't about lacking customer focus.
Okay.
It's confusing general customer focus with a precise focus on customer benefit. GM, again, is an example. They added lifestyle features, things they thought customers wanted.
Right.
Meanwhile, Japanese rivals were nailing reliability a core benefit. GM also did extensive market segmentation, but without adding real new benefit, which often led to just cutting prices. Remember the employee prices for everyone deal?
Yeah, I remember that. Big splash, but maybe not lasting.
Exactly. Transitory gains. It's focusing on features or price without boosting the underlying value proposition.
Okay, that's the customer focus trap. What's the second one?
The tying costs to earnings trap. This is when you manage costs just to hit your quarterly or annual earnings targets.
Which sounds like what finance departments are supposed to do.
Well, yes, but it dangerously blurs the line between good and bad costs. In good times, bad costs often creep up, unchecked. Then, when times get tough.
You cut costs across the board, including the good ones.
Precisely. You cut essential good costs needed for future benefit, damaging growth, and complexity spirals. Look at GM versus Toyota again. GM had 76 models, $7.5 billion in capital expenditure. Toyota spent twice that, $15 billion, but on only 29 models.
So Toyota's spending per model was way, way higher in terms of investment focus.
Or, put it the other way, GM's capital expenditure per model was vastly lower, spread too thin across too much complexity. That complexity breeds bad costs, making it almost impossible to tell good from bad.
So for you, listening, if you're a leader, what's the core toolkit? How do you actually achieve profitability and growth without compromise?
It boils down to that relentless, almost obsessive focus on true customer benefit and structuring your entire operation to deliver that benefit efficiently.
Okay.
Practically, Dodd and Favaro suggest making grow customer benefit your mantra, your broken record. Constantly ask 3 questions about any initiative. Is this intended to increase customer benefit? How exactly? And what's the evidence? Chris Jones at J. Walter Thompson apparently did this constantly.
Be specific, demand proof. What else?
Ask how to grow your market, not just your market share. Cadbury Schweppes did this. They innovated to increase the overall confectionery market benefit for retailers, like placing products in multiple store locations, which grew their share too.
Interesting. Think bigger than just stealing share.
Right. And ask what would grow benefit for your customer's customer. Alkin, the packaging company, went directly to pet owners to find packaging innovations they'd pay more for, benefiting their direct customers, the pet food companies.
Go further down the value chain.
Exactly. Define your business by customer benefits, not just products. BP redefined itself around the freedom to move, to heat, to see. That led them into gas, solar, wind early on. Very different from competitors stuck just on petroleum.
That broadens your horizon significantly.
It does. And finally, rigorously map costs to customer willingness to pay. That BP Lubricants example in Germany. They found workshop owners valued channel exclusivity way more than fancy motor racing sponsorships. Cut sponsorship, keep the exclusivity, save money, keep customers happy. Nextplock, the retailer, constantly challenged itself to deliver higher quality at lower prices through smarter design and sourcing.
Prune the bad costs.
Yeah.
Invest in the good ones based on real benefit.
That's the essence of it.
Okay, that's a fantastic toolkit for managing profitability and growth. But, like you said, that's just one tension. What about that perennial challenge, delivering strong results today while still making those crucial investments for tomorrow? This is our second tension. Today versus tomorrow.
Yes. This is where so many companies stumble, often because they're driven by, well, myths about the market.
Myths, like what?
Well, the first big one is the multiples myth. This is the idea that market analysts only care about short-term earnings and that price-to-earnings ratios, PE ratios, are basically fixed.
Which feels true sometimes, the pressure for quarterly results.
It feels true, but the data tells a different story. Look at Coca-Cola versus PepsiCo between 2000 and 2005. Coke's earnings actually grew more than Pepsi's 22% versus 18%.
So Coke should have done better in the market.
You'd think. But Coke's PE ratio plummeted from 69 down to 21. The result, their total shareholder return saw an annual decline of 5%.
A decline even with higher earnings growth.
Yeah. Meanwhile, PepsiCo's PE fell much less, and they delivered 6% annual growth in TSR. The market wasn't just looking at the immediate numbers, it was judging the longer-term potential and sustainability of those earnings.
So the market is smarter, or at least more forward-looking, than the myth suggests. What's the other myth? You mentioned the consecutive earnings growth myth.
Exactly. This is the idea that an uninterrupted streak of positive earnings per share, EPS growth, is super highly valued, hit the number every single quarter.
Companies definitely strive for that.
They do, but the research found something interesting. Within groups of companies achieving EPS growth with similar frequency, those with sporadic growth missing a quarter here or there often had slightly higher TSR than those with perfect consecutive streaks.
Higher. That seems backwards.
It does, but trying too hard to sustain an aggressive streak can lead to damaging behavior. Think about Home Depot, HP, Gillette. They all eventually missed aggressive targets set to maintain streaks, and the market punished them severely for it.
Because they likely sacrificed the future to hit the short-term numbers.
That's the implication. What the market really values, according to Dodd and Favaro, is a high batting average on both today and tomorrow. Companies that performed better than average on both short-term earnings and long-term economic profits, they earned an impressive 21% annual TSR over 2 decades.
21%.
Compared to just 1% for companies that were poor on both measures. Huge difference.
Okay, so the common bond here, the thing that allows for hitting both today and tomorrow, is what they call sustainable earnings. What does that mean precisely?
Sustainable earnings are earnings that are not generated by sort of borrowing from the future.
Like cutting R&D.
Exactly. Cutting R&D, postponing essential maintenance or projects, selling off assets just for a capital gain, maybe even unsustainable share buybacks.
Okay.
Nor are they borrowed from the past, like just sweating obsolete assets, old telecom tech or chemical-based film processes, long after they should have been replaced.
Got it. So where do they come from?
They're underpinned by proprietary assets and capabilities that have a genuine future life. Think of a strong pharmaceutical patent, a powerful brand like Singapore Airlines' customer service reputation, or a unique technology. The goal isn't just sustaining earnings growth, it's growing sustainable earnings. There's a subtle but crucial difference.
Grow the earnings that can be sustained, not just maintain a growth number artificially. That makes sense. What traps pull companies away from this?
The first big one is the earnings growth target trap, setting unrealistic, often externally driven, annual earnings growth targets. This forces managers into relying on those unsustainable earnings sources.
The uneconomic operating maneuvers Warren Buffett talked about.
Precisely. Jim Kiltz, when he took over Gillette, called the pressure cooker environment he found the circle of doom. It leads to stop-start investment overspending in good times, slashing investment in bad times. Very damaging.
Okay, that's one trap. What's another?
The present value trap. Now, net present value, NPV calculations are theoretically sound for valuation, right?
Sure, standard finance tool.
But in practice, they can offer too much wiggle room, especially for managers with relatively short tenures. It can be easy to justify projects with rosy long-term projections that might never actually materialize given how uncertain the future really is.
So the math looks good, but it relies on potentially shaky future assumptions.
Exactly. People like Richard Zanino at Dow Jones and Franz Humer at Roche have openly talked about how arbitrary some long-term R&D and capital expenditure decisions can feel despite the NTV models.
So how can leaders avoid these traps? What's the toolkit for managing today versus tomorrow effectively?
The core idea here is to strive to be correctly valued by the market, not necessarily highly valued, and to build a culture focused on long-term sustainable earnings.
Correctly valued, not highly valued. Interesting. How?
It means avoiding overvaluation, which just creates unrealistic expectations. Be candid in investor communications. BP, for example, started holding separate discussions about long-term development, away from the quarterly results frenzy. Gillette and Coca-Cola famously stopped giving quarterly earnings guidance.
Taking the focus off the short-term treadmill.
Right, and set goals for sustainable earnings. Jim Kiltz at Gillette rejected aspirational targets that couldn't be met sustainably. He based targets on realistic industry growth plus achievable productivity gains. Emerson Electric is another company known for this discipline.
Manage expectations, focus on what's real.
And crucially, manage the long term by managing how the short term is produced. I love this quote from Norm Bobbins at LaSalle Bank. "It's not what I want, it's how I want it achieved."
Process over just the number.
Yes. Use leading indicators in your reviews. Cardinal Health, for instance, looked closely at the customer pipeline and quarterly reviews to gauge the sustainability of current earnings. Are we just milking old customers or building future business?
Looking beyond the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Maybe hold a post-earnings review. Disaggregate the earnings, what was one-off versus repeatable, new customers versus existing. Understand the lifespan of your earnings streams.
And incentives. How do you pay people?
Pay for tomorrow's performance as well as today's. Cadbury Schweppes had a bonus reinvestment scheme. If managers had a 10% real economic profit growth target over 3 years, their initial bonus was matched 100%. That directly incentivizes sustainable long-term value creation.
Aligning pay with the long view. Makes sense.
Also, invest based on your long-term oil price, not just the current spot price. BP did this countercyclically in the late 90s when oil was cheap. They kept investing in exploration based on their long-term price assumption, positioning them well for the future.
Don't let short-term fluctuations dictate long-term strategy.
Right. Allocate management time based on sustainable earnings at stake. Bob Walter at Cardinal Health structured meeting agendas to prioritize long-term strategy and capabilities, fighting the common urgent, driving out the important problem.
Be intentional about where leaders spend their focus.
Yes. And finally, ask for alternatives. Travis Engen at Alken required teams to present 3 to 5 alternatives for both the destination and the path to get there. It fosters flexibility and better decisions when the future is uncertain.
Builds resilience.
Oh, okay.
We've covered profitability versus growth, today versus tomorrow. Let's tackle the third and final tension, whole versus parts. This one really hits home for anyone working in a multi-business company.
How do you improve the performance of each individual business unit and capture those elusive benefits of belonging to a larger integrated whole all at the same time?
It's a classic headache. And what's fascinating here is how Dodd and Favaro frame value creation in these companies. They distinguish between 2 types.
Okay.
First, there's vertical value. This is performance added by better management of an individual unit, setting clear goals, replacing managers, improving operations within that silo. It doesn't really depend on other units.
Got it. Value created within the box.
Right. Then there's horizontal value. This is the value added through coordination and, dare I say, synergies across units. Shared services, knowledge transfer, cross-selling, that kind of thing.
Synergies, the holy grail or sometimes the mirage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they illustrate this with the advertising giants. Think Omnicom Group. They traditionally focused heavily on vertical value, give the agencies lots of autonomy, keep the central office tiny, let the unit shine.
A loose federation model. Versus their rival, WPP. WPP historically focused much more on horizontal value. A more active corporate center involved in talent management across agencies, central procurement, shared IT, knowledge sharing, even branding WPP itself as a group.
A more integrated approach. So vertical versus horizontal. But you hinted at a problem.
The big problem is that research often shows negative horizontal value. Many multi-business companies actually trade at a discount compared to what their individual parts would be worth if spun off. The so-called conglomerate discount.
Meaning the whole is worth less than the sum of its parts.
Often, yes. It suggests that attempts to create that horizontal value, those synergies, frequently fail or even destroy value. Central functions become bureaucratic and distant. Coordination creates complexity and cost. The corporate center itself costs money. It can be a net negative.
So how do companies achieve positive horizontal value without sacrificing that vertical unit performance? What's the common bond here?
The common bond, the key enabler, are what Dodd and Favaro call diagonal assets.
Diagonal assets. Okay, that's a new one on me. What are they?
Think of them as capabilities and resources, often intangible, that help vertical assets create horizontal value and help horizontal assets create vertical value. They connect the 2 dimensions.
Intangible like?
Like trust between units, transparency and reporting, a sense of connectedness, a shared identity or common aspiration across the group. maybe common processes or platforms.
So things that facilitate collaboration and shared purpose.
Exactly. For instance, a shared logistics system that's a horizontal asset, it can free up individual business units to focus on their core activities, which boosts their vertical value.
Okay.
But without diagonal assets like trust, shared performance metrics, and clear communication protocols, that shared logistics system might just lead to finger-pointing and inefficiency. The diagonal assets make the horizontal asset actually work for the vertical unit.
Got it. They enable the synergy. So if diagonal assets are the key, what are the traps companies fall into when managing whole versus parts?
Well, echoing the previous tensions, there are traps that pull you too far one way or the other. First, the autonomy trap.
Giving the parts too much freedom.
Right. Giving too much autonomy can lead to wildly different cultures. Internal politics, turf wars, what they call an accountability excuse. It's not my fault, it's theirs. This obviously hinders any company-wide benefits or collaboration. Matt Barrett, when he led Barclays, famously disliked the "I want to do my own thing" attitude from unit heads.
He wanted them pulling together. Okay, autonomy trap. What's the opposite?
The centralization trap. This is where you aggregate functions, IT, HR, finance, hoping for scale economies or specialization.
Which sounds logical.
It can be, but it often creates a huge coordination burden. Accountability gets blurred, who's really responsible when things go wrong. And it can lead to this unproductive seesawing where companies centralize, then decentralize, then centralize again, never quite getting it right.
Chasing efficiency but creating bureaucracy.
Exactly. Asia Brown Bovary, ABB, back in the day, had this incredibly complex matrix structure trying to balance global businesses and local operations. It eventually collapsed under its own weight, immense coordination costs, totally blurred accountabilities.
A cautionary tale. Any other traps?
One more they mention is parenting bias. This is the implicit belief, often held at the corporate center, that cooperation between units must be forced or mandated from the top.
Instead of letting it happen organically.
Right. The authors argue that business units are perfectly capable of collaborating when there are genuine mutual benefits. They partner with outside suppliers all the time. The center's role should be to facilitate that collaboration by building those diagonal assets and ensuring fair value exchange, not necessarily to dictate it.
Okay, so foster the conditions for cooperation. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the toolkit for leaders trying to navigate this whole versus parts tension successfully?
The core approach is really about fostering genuine connectedness and a shared purpose across the organization while cleverly reinforcing accountability without totally constraining autonomy.
A delicate balance.
It is. One key is to pay for both vertical and horizontal value. Lewis Campbell at Textron introduced bonuses that explicitly multiplied an individual manager's unit performance with the overall company performance. That incentivized managers to wear two hats, perform well locally, but also contribute to the group.
Skin in both games.
Exactly. Matt Barrett at Barclays apparently used some shock tactics to enforce this dual hat culture. Leaders also need to work tirelessly personally to build that sense of connectedness.
Oh.
Through clear behavioral norms, BP had its no surprises rule. Through shared cultural traits, Cadbury Schweppes talked about the 3 A's: accountable, adaptable, aggressive. By having the executive team work on a common corporate agenda, not just representing their divisions like at Roche. Sometimes even simple things like physical proximity. Dow Jones apparently got huge benefits just by bringing siloed teams into one room. Xerox called it touch-based leadership.
Building the human connections.
Yes. And sometimes you need to make tough calls on people. GE was famous for its approach. If managers delivered results but didn't embody the company values, which included teamwork, they had to go. Cadbury said they needed managers who could earn authority across boundaries, not just rely on hierarchy.
Yeah, ultra and people are key.
Absolutely. Tell your customer benefit story across the group. A compelling higher-order purpose beyond just financials can unite disparate parts. Cadbury's Moments of Pleasure for Confectionery. Intercontinental Hotels Group's 360 brand idea aimed at benefiting both hotel owners and guests. Barclays' John Varley made sure senior managers had direct customer contact to reinforce the need for a one-company approach.
Connect everyone to the ultimate purpose.
Right, and reinforce accountability without killing autonomy. Barclays transformed into what they called a flotilla of motorboats, decentralized decision authority, but centralized goals, standards, and risk management. BBVA empowered regional businesses but strengthened central control in critical areas like IT and funding.
Smart centralization, maybe.
Or maybe standardization. Ask whether you should standardize rather than centralize. Textron, which is incredibly diverse, uses common enterprise management processes like Six Sigma across its different businesses. They don't try to centralize manufacturing, which wouldn't make sense, but they standardize the approach to improvement.
Common language and tools, not necessarily common structure.
Exactly. And finally, use those diagonal assets to guide acquisitions and portfolio choices. Textron acquires companies where its diagonal capability in manufacturing improvement can add tangible value, avoiding vague, woolly synergies.
Make the whole actually add value to the parts.
That's the goal.
We've journeyed through these three fundamental tensions now. Profitability versus growth, today versus tomorrow, and whole versus parts. It's really clear they're not, separate boxes.
No, definitely not. And this is kind of the grand unification point the authors make. These three tensions are really just different, interconnected ways of looking at the same fundamental goal, maximizing sustainable economic profits over the long haul.
So a problem in one area can pop up in another.
Absolutely. Poor whole versus parts management, like duplicated R&D efforts, can directly hurt your profitability versus growth performance because of all the bad costs. Leaders constantly feel the pressure across all three, though maybe one feels heavier depending on the company's situation or industry.
So the big message from Dodd and Favaro is really,
Right.
stop trying to make these hard choices between good objectives. Abandon that choices school of management.
The idea that you have to chase one rabbit at a time.
Right. And embrace the both school. They make a distinction. Prioritizing tasks is essential, good management. But prioritizing objectives, saying this year we focus only on profit, next year only on growth, that's what pushes companies into that damaging corporate cycle.
Exactly. Leaders have to make it crystal clear culturally that trade-offs between these core objectives are an absolute last resort, a sign of failure almost. Remember Sir John Sunderland at Cadbury Schweppes demanding the penny in the bun?
Yeah, profit and growth, not one or the other.
He expected both. And the path to getting both, to sustain success, lies in relentlessly managing and strengthening those common bonds we talked about for each tension.
Customer benefit for profit growth.
Sustainable earnings for today, tomorrow.
And diagonal assets for whole parts.
Right. And notice, these bonds are often intangible benefit perception. Earnings quality, trust, connectedness. They require nuanced, indirect management, not just pulling levers.
And this isn't about finding some magical new management tool, is it? It sounds more like using the tools we already have differently.
Precisely. The authors kind of reflect on how the cycle of management ideas, the next big thing, TQM, re-engineering, whatever, often mirrors the corporate cycle itself. They offer single objective solutions that ultimately fail because they ignore the inherent tensions.
So the real breakthrough isn't a new tool.
It's understanding how to coherently combine the existing tools, your standards, your strategy, your structure, your processes, your culture, to achieve multiple, often conflicting objectives simultaneously. Even if the combination doesn't look perfectly neat or aligned on paper, maybe you pay for short-term results but promote based on long-term track record. It's about making the whole system work towards both.
A modern answer to those ancient dilemmas like Odysseus sailing between Scylla and Charybdis, where you thought you just had to pick which monster would eat you.
Exactly. Find a way to navigate between them, or better yet, find a way they aren't actually in opposition if you frame the problem right.
Okay, so we've journeyed through the three fundamental tensions that really define business performance. Profitability versus growth, today versus tomorrow, and whole versus parts. We've uncovered their common bonds, customer benefits, sustainable earnings, diagonal assets, and seen how some really successful companies manage to master them without making those painful compromises.
And hopefully it's clear this isn't just academic theory. It's a practical blueprint for building sustained excellence. The core message, really, is that success comes not from getting better at making hard choices between good objectives, but from finding innovative, often non-obvious ways to achieve them all.
Moving beyond that either-or trap.
And fully embracing the both imperative. It requires different thinking, different leadership.
Right. So now, armed with the insights from this deep dive into the three tensions, here's something for you, our listener, to think about. What is the single, seemingly contradictory objective in your own current work, or maybe even your life, that if you truly committed to achieving both sides without compromise, would unlock your next level of performance?
That's a great question.
It's your invitation to apply this principle of winning without compromise, and maybe redefine what you thought was possible.